You've spent so long watching everything but yourself, scrolling timelines, reading the room, tracking their moods, their opinions, their validation, but rarely, truly, watching you. And in that slow drift away from yourself, something essential was lost. Not your potential, not your intelligence, but your focus, the most sacred currency you have. Where your focus goes, your life follows. And most people, they've handed that focus away inch by inch, tap by tap, scroll by scroll, conversation by conversation, until they wake up tired, but not from movement, from leakage, from spending energy on things that don't nourish them. People who don't respect them, thoughts that don't belong to them, and they call it normal. They call it life. But it's not life. It's survival. And you were never meant to survive like this. You were meant to thrive. But thriving doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with doing less of the wrong things. It begins with one radical decision: to focus on yourself, not in a selfish way, in a sacred way, to stop giving away your mental real estate to people who haven't earned your trust, to stop giving your mornings to the chaos of your phone, to stop letting the noise outside be louder than the quiet truth inside. That's not ego, that's energy management. And energy is not infinite. It's not a switch you flip on and off. It's a well, and once it's dry, you can't fake your way through life anymore. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in your burnout. And that's the wake-up call. The moment you realize this isn't a time problem, it's an attention problem. You're not out of time, you're out of clarity. And clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from cutting deeper, cutting the noise, the fake urgency, the internal dialogue that tells you you need to be everything for everyone. You don't. You just need to be whole for yourself. And that begins by shifting your energy back inward, not to obsess, not to escape, but to return. Return to your center, to the part of you that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be, to the part of you that doesn't need to impress to feel powerful, that doesn't need to explain to feel valid. The Stoics lived by this. They didn't chase validation. They mastered attention. They knew that what you feed with your focus becomes what you serve with your life. So if your focus is scattered, your life will be too. If your energy is reactive, your experience will be chaos. But if your focus is inward, grounded, aligned, everything shifts. You stop moving for attention and start moving from intention. You stop asking, "What do they think of me?" and start asking, "Is this who I want to be?" And when that question becomes your compass, your energy begins to return, not all at once, but slowly, steadily, like breath, like peace. And from that place, you start building a new life, not louder, but clearer, not faster, but more on purpose. That's what happens when you focus on yourself. You stop leaking. You stop performing. You start creating from stillness, from strength, from self-respect. And when your life is built on that, you don't burn out. You burn steady. Because now, your energy has direction. Your focus has ownership. And your mind is finally yours again. Your attention isn't just a tool. It's not a resource to lend to everything and everyone. It's your soul in motion, your energy in real time, the sharpest reflection of what you worship. That's why the Stoics didn't just talk about virtue. They focused on it. Every day, every breath, because they knew what you focus on and becomes who you are. So the real question is never, "What should I do today?" The real question is, "What deserves me today?" Because most of what pulls on you doesn't deserve you. The gossip, the endless updates, the algorithm that never sleeps, the opinions that were never yours to carry, they drain you. Not because they're evil, but because they're irrelevant. And nothing kills purpose faster than living on a diet of the irrelevant. But that's what modern life does. It teaches you to give your attention away before you even know it's missing. So you check your phone, before you check your breath. You scroll the world before you've centered in yourself. You absorb everything and remember nothing, except this dull ache of emptiness you can't quite name. That ache? It's the cost of divided attention, of waking up every day and never truly arriving in yourself. And here's the truth. You can't focus on yourself if you keep outsourcing your energy to things that would never even notice if you disappeared. So you have to become ruthless with what enters your field, not to isolate, but to liberate, to free your mind from the prison of pointless noise. You don't owe your energy to every notification, every trending opinion, every argument, every request. You owe it to you, to your clarity, to your healing, to your direction, and that means saying no not just to people, but to patterns. The pattern of constant distraction, the pattern of trying to fix things you didn't break, the pattern of checking everyone else's temperature before asking yourself, how do I feel right now? Because your nervous system is not a social media feed. It wasn't built to process this much noise, this much comparison, this much stimulation. It was built for presence, for rhythm, for clarity, and you can return to that, but only when you stop giving your attention to everything that doesn't build you. The Stoics practiced this through boundaries, internal ones. They didn't need digital detoxes, they lived detoxed, not by forced me, but by focus. They gave energy only to what aligned with virtue, character, truth. And that's the work for you now, to protect your attention like it's the sacred thing you own, because it is. Protect it by choosing what you consume, what you reply to, what you rehearse in your mind. Protect it by slowing down your reactivity, by taking a breath before you respond, by asking, is this pulling me closer to myself or further away? Because the further you drift, the more chaotic your life will feel, not because you're broken, but because you're scattered, and scattered energy can't build anything. So reclaim it, recenter, not someday, now, not for others, for you, because when you finally decide to focus on yourself, with full presence, with full honesty, with full reverence, you stop leaking, you stop searching, you stop fighting for space in a world that was never meant to hold your truth. You become the space. And in that space, you build a life not based on urgency, but on alignment. Energy is everything. Not motivation, not hype, not ambition, energy, pure, quiet, invisible. The way your body feels before your mind explains it. The way you walk into a room and either shrink or anchor. The tone of your presence when no one is watching. And the truth is simple. Your energy is being pulled, constantly, by people, by screens, by thoughts you didn't ask for, by situations that don't serve you. And every single one of those pulls costs something. Not just time, not just mental bandwidth. It costs power, because wherever your energy goes, so goes your clarity, your presence, your strength. The Stoics understood this. That's why their discipline didn't begin with doing more. It began with withdrawing, not from life, but from the non-essential, from the opinions that didn't matter, from the arguments that didn't change anything, from the noise that had nothing to do with virtue. They weren't running away. They were returning inward, because that's what you're really doing when you focus on yourself. You're not escaping people. You're reclaiming power. You're taking back the parts of yourself you accidentally scattered across conversations, relationships, and habits that no longer reflect who you are becoming. That withdrawal, it's not selfish, it's sacred, but it's hard. Because most people have never learned how to say, this doesn't build me, so it doesn't deserve me. Instead, they stay in roles, in dynamics, in cycles, because they've been taught that being loyal to others matters more than being loyal to their own soul. But that loyalty, if it costs you your energy, if it distorts your peace, if it requires you to abandon yourself daily, is not loyalty. It's self-betrayal dressed as virtue, and nothing drains your spirit faster than chronically showing up in places you've outgrown. So the Stoic path asks you one question: where are you investing energy that no longer gives you a return? And more importantly, why? Why are you still explaining yourself to people who never truly listen? Why are you still checking in with environments that exhaust you? Why are you still running after validation when your own clarity has never failed you? These are hard questions, but they free you. Because once you answer them honestly, you begin to reallocate your power. You begin to withdraw, not in bitterness, but in self-respect. You stop attending every conversation you're invited to. You stop narrating your pain to people who haven't earned that intimacy. You stop watering relationships that have proven they won't grow. And in doing so, you come back to yourself, to your breath, to your center. And from that center, you become undistracted, focused, clean, steady. Your energy is no longer reactive, it's responsive, directed, quietly sharp. And when that happens, everything changes. You no longer chase impact, you create it. You no longer manage people's perceptions, you master your own alignment. You no longer speak from exhaustion, you speak from clarity. That's what happens when you finally say, I withdraw my energy from what doesn't build me. It's not a retreat, it's a recalibration, a sacred pulling inward so that when you move again, you move with power. Because your life is a mirror of your energy, and your energy is a reflection of your focus, and your focus is your freedom. Every day the world tries to pull you apart, one notification at a time, one distraction at a time, one shallow demand after another. You don't even notice it happening at first. It's subtle, it's slow, but over time, you feel it. That slow. Drift away from your center, away from clarity, away from peace. You start to feel scattered, tired in a way that rest doesn't fix. Present in body, but not in self. Because when you live in a world that rewards reaction, urgency, noise, stillness becomes a rebellion. And that's the rebellion the Stoics lived. They didn't escape the world. They anchored themselves inside it. While others reacted, they responded. While others chased noise, they cultivated depth. While others explained, defended, and proved, they simply lived in alignment. But alignment doesn't just happen. It's built, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, decision by decision, and it begins the moment you say, I'm done being pulled. It's time to return to center. Not because life slows down for you, but because you refuse to be ruled by its speed, because the world will never stop demanding. But you can stop obeying. You can stop answering everything that calls your name out of habit, guilt, or fear. You can stop equating presence with availability. You can stop reacting to everything and start reclaiming something. Your attention, your space, your clarity. The moment you do that, you begin to rebuild. And rebuilding your center doesn't require a monastery. It doesn't require isolation. It requires intention. You rebuild by saying no without apology, by rising slower, by speaking less, by moving like someone who doesn't chase energy, but protects it. You rebuild when you remember that inner stillness isn't found. It's forged. Forged in moments where the world demands more, and you give less. Forged in decisions where chaos invites you to react, and you choose to pause. Forged in boundaries that say, I won't trade peace for proximity ever again. This is what Stoicism was always about. Not emotional suppression, but emotional sovereignty. Not silence for silence's sake, but discipline in how and when you speak, move, and engage. So how do you rebuild your center in a world that constantly tries to dismantle it? You start by noticing where your energy leaks. Notice the conversations that leave you fragmented, the tasks that keep you busy but not aligned, the people who ask for your time but not your growth. And then, you begin the audit. What stays? What goes? What gets your presence? What gets your silence? Not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. Because clarity is what rebuilds your spine when life bends it. Because focus is what sharpens your intuition when the noise tries to blur it. Because stillness is what brings you back when everything tries to pull you out. The truth is you don't need a new plan. You need a new relationship with your own energy, one that's rooted in reverence, in respect, in the deep knowing that what you give your focus to, you give your life to. And that means your time is not your most sacred resource. Your attention is, because what you pay attention to builds you. So build wisely. Build slowly. Build with the calm of someone who has finally returned to their own inner ground. You don't need to prove that you're focused. You just need to become it. You don't need to announce that you're healing. You just need to stop leaking. And you don't need to speak louder to be heard. You just need to rebuild your center so deeply, so deliberately, that your silence becomes a language of its own. Peace is not something you find, it's something you protect. And to protect it, you need boundaries, not just spoken, but lived, felt, rooted in who you are, not in who others expect you to be. But most people don't build boundaries. They build personas, masks, polished versions of themselves designed to keep the world happy and themselves quietly exhausted. Because saying yes is easier. Being liked is addictive. Approval feels like oxygen, until you realize it's not air you're breathing, it's validation. And validation fades, fast, so you give, and give, until giving becomes your identity, until silence becomes resentment, until showing up becomes a slow erosion of everything that once felt sacred. And that's where it begins. The decision. The line. The return. To yourself. To your energy. To the parts of you that no longer want to perform. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're mirrors. They don't just tell others who you are. They remind you. And every time you set one, you reclaim a little more of your life. But boundaries aren't loud. They don't always need a speech. They don't require drama. They don't need to be understood. They just need to be clear. And clarity is a quiet kind of power. It doesn't fight. It doesn't chase. It doesn't defend. It simply says, this is my space and I don't abandon myself to maintain peace with anyone else. The Stoics lived this way, not as rebels, but as masters of self. They didn't say yes out of fear. They didn't say no out of guilt. They moved from principle, from virtue, from an inner code that didn't fluctuate with opinions or pressure. They taught that inner peace is built, not found. And the first brick is boundary. A line drawn not against others but for yourself. So if you feel drained, if you feel resentful, if you feel like parts of you are scattered across conversations you didn't want to have, commitments you didn't want to make, roles you never chose, stop and ask, where am I leaking energy in the name of being nice? Where am I betraying myself in the name of being liked? Where am I saying yes when my whole body is saying no? These questions aren't selfish. They're sacred because they bring you back to your inner home. And once you've returned, you speak differently, not louder, but cleaner. You say what you mean. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for your time, your silence, your space. You let your no be a full sentence. You let your absence be your boundary. You let your stillness be your answer, and what happens next? The world adjusts, the noise shifts, the takers disappear, and what remains is real. Because your boundaries don't just repel chaos, they attract clarity. They signal to the world. This is someone who knows where they stand, someone who isn't ruled by approval, someone whose peace is not for sale. And that energy, that calm, firm, rooted energy, speaks louder than any speech ever could. So build them. Not to push people away, but to invite the right ones in. Not to protect your ego, but to preserve your soul. Because in a world that teaches you to be everything for everyone, you must remember, being everything for yourself is not selfish. It's sovereign. Most people try to change their life by changing their habits, their schedules, their appearance, their environment. But real transformation doesn't start with action. It starts with energy, because energy is the atmosphere of identity. And if your energy stays the same, so will your outcomes. That's the hard truth. You can read every book. You can write 1,000 goals. You can build the perfect routine. But if the energy underneath all that still carries the weight of who you used to be, nothing sticks. Because you can't outperform the frequency you live on. You can't rise if you're still vibrating with resentment, with self-doubt, with comparison, with chaos. The Stoics knew this, though they never used the word energy. They spoke of equanimity, inner stillness, the kind of strength that isn't measured in movement, but in how deeply you're rooted when the world shakes. They weren't interested in hype. They were building foundation. They were shifting their posture toward life, from reaction to responsibility, from chaos to clarity, from noise to direction, and that shift was energetic. So here's the question for you. What is the dominant energy you've been living from? Really ask it. Is it survival, fear, proving, pleasing, needing to be liked, needing to be seen? Because whatever it is that's shaping every word, every movement, every boundary you set or don't set. And the moment you become aware of that, you're free to choose again, not to abandon who you've been, but to upgrade the energy behind your choices. Because when you shift your energy, you shift your identity. You're no longer operating as the person who's chasing peace. You are peace. You're no longer someone trying to prove worth. You are worthy. And that shows in your stillness. You're no longer desperate to be seen. You've seen yourself, and that's enough. That shift is not always loud. Sometimes it's as subtle as walking into a room and no longer needing to explain your silence. Sometimes it's letting go of urgency, not because there's nothing to do, but because you no longer believe urgency is what makes you valuable. Sometimes it's changing the tone of your voice, not to sound smarter, but to sound more like yourself. Because your energy tells the truth before your mouth does. People feel it. Your presence, your posture, your boundaries, your yes, your no. And when your energy is clean, your life becomes clear. You attract different people. You navigate conflict with grace. You move without forcing. You rest without guilt. And most of all, you speak differently. Your words come from clarity, from alignment, from deep stillness and not shallow reaction. That's the Stoic way, not to suppress, but to transmute, to take the reactive noise of the ego and turn it into the quiet power of character. And character doesn't perform, it radiates. So ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? What energy are you embodying when things don't go your way? Are you still centered? Or are you still chasing? Because your identity isn't something you find. It's something you align with. Through breath, through stillness, through the quiet decision to no longer live in energy that doesn't match your truth. That's how everything changes. Not in one giant leap, but in the moment you say, I no longer accept this energy as mine. And when you mean it, when you shift for real, the world will feel it before you say a word. In a world that moves fast, that rewards urgency, that praises hustle, that idolizes reaction, stillness is misunderstood. They call it laziness. They mistake it for indecision. They assume you're weak when you don't respond. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of mastery. It's the power to feel everything and still choose to move with clarity. Stillness is the space between trigger and response, between insult and reaction, between demand and decision. It is in that space that power is born, but we've been trained out of it, trained to rush, to always answer, to prove, defend, explain. We fear silence. We confuse it with invisibility. We fill it with noise, as if being quiet means we're falling behind. But the truth? Stillness is not falling behind. It's rising above. Because only those who have mastered themselves can resist the pull of panic. Only those who have done the inner work can stay calm when the world demands chaos. And when you shift from reacting to observing, everything changes. You no longer take things personally. You no longer feel the need to jump into every debate. You no longer chase people who misunderstand you. Why? Because you've come home to your center, and your center is still. It doesn't need to defend. It doesn't need to convince. It simply is. That's where your true voice is born. Not from noise, but from anchored awareness. You begin to see clearly. Most arguments aren't worth your breath. Most reactions only rob your peace. Most of what you think you need to respond to will resolve itself if you just pause. And that pause, that sacred moment of stillness, that's your advantage. Because while others are spending energy to be loud, you are gaining energy by being grounded. You stop showing up out of obligation. You stop answering out of fear. You stop moving out of desperation. And when you do move, it's felt because it's rare, because it's real, because it's no longer coming from insecurity, it's coming from alignment. The Stoics called this ataraxia, unshakable inner tranquility. Not because nothing shakes you, but because your root runs deeper than the surface winds. You are not avoiding life. You are meeting it on your terms. You are speaking only when the message is ready. You are choosing silence not to hide, but to sharpen, to observe, to wait until your truth is fully formed, not just emotionally triggered, and in doing that, you become untouchable. Not because you fight harder, but because you no longer fight what doesn't deserve you. That's the gift of stillness. It gives you back your time, your presence, your power, because you are no longer being pulled. You are placing yourself intentionally, calmly, without noise, without rush, without guilt. Stillness is not a retreat. It's a reset, a recalibration, a return to source. And in that return, you remember. You don't owe the world your reaction. You owe yourself your peace. So hold it. Keep it. Nurture it, like sacred ground, because in a world where everyone is performing, the one who is present becomes magnetic. Not everything requires your energy. Not everyone deserves your response. Not every storm needs your presence in it. You don't have to show up to every fire just because someone calls your name. You don't have to attend every battle just because your ego feels challenged. You don't have to be available to every emotion, every opinion, every conflict, because the truth is, you've been too available for too long. Available to drama, to doubt, to distraction, to the noise of a world that doesn't care for your peace, only for your reaction. But what if you chose to become unavailable? Unavailable to chaos, unavailable to urgency, unavailable to guilt-driven decisions and fear-based responses. That's not avoidance. That's discernment. It's knowing the difference between what's yours to carry and what never belonged to you. The Stoics lived by this principle. They didn't react to everything. They weren't emotionally accessible to anything that didn't serve virtue, truth, clarity. They weren't cold. They were controlled. Not because they lacked feeling, but because they trained themselves to reserve their energy for what actually mattered. And you can do the same. You must, if you want to live a life that is not ruled by noise. Because if you stay open to everything, you'll be owned by anything. And no matter how strong you are, if you don't protect your access, you will bleed energy into places that can never fill you. So the question is, what are you currently available to that keeps pulling you out of alignment? Is it people who only reach for you when they need something? Is it thoughts that loop in your mind without offering any clarity? Is it conversations that leave you feeling small, guilty, unseen? Whatever it is, it's your job now to create space from it, to draw the line, to go inward, to clean your energy. Because the cleaner your energy, the clearer your life becomes. You stop chasing things that are out of season. You stop responding to things that are beneath your peace. You stop engaging with people who only speak to the older version of you, the one you've already outgrown. That's the work. That's the discipline, to become unavailable to the frequency of your past, unavailable to the lies you used to believe about yourself, unavailable to the narratives that kept you reactive, insecure, and always on edge. Because every time you respond from that place, you reinforce the story that chaos still has access to you. But when you pause, when you choose to not respond, when you close the gate of your nervous system to anything that feels wrong, unclean, or misaligned, you evolve. You signal to yourself, I don't do that anymore. I don't play those games. I don't entertain those patterns. I don't enter rooms where I have to shrink. And that signal, it rewires everything. It brings your nervous system back to peace. It brings your identity back to center. It brings your purpose back into focus. You stop living on edge. You stop rehearsing your reactions. You stop over-explaining to people who only want access, not understanding. And in that stillness, you rise, not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably, because now you're not responding to the world, you're leading your own. And the more unavailable you become to chaos, the more space you create for truth, for presence, for creation, for peace. That's how the Stoics lived. They didn't chase stillness, they created it, by choosing, moment to moment, what was worthy of their energy and what was not. So choose, today, with intention, with clarity, with love for the version of you who no longer wants to live on call for chaos. Let the world knock, you don't have to answer. Most people don't live by alignment, they live by approval. They say what's expected, they nod when they disagree, they smile to avoid conflict, they trade their truth for belonging and call it connection. But connection without honesty is not connection. It's performance, it's survival, it's slow erosion, and of clarity, of self, of peace. And every time you say yes when you mean no, a piece of you disappears. Every time you shrink your voice to keep the peace, you lose the deeper peace that only self-respect can give you. This is why the Stoics lived the way they did. They didn't live for applause. They lived for alignment. They knew the difference between being liked and being at peace with yourself. Because one is external, conditional, fragile, and the other is freedom. But that freedom doesn't come cheap. It costs you your people-pleasing, your over-explaining, your need to be seen a certain way. It costs you the comfort of being liked by everyone and gives you the power of being yourself, even when you're not. So ask yourself, how many things have you done lately just to be approved? How many times have you ignored your gut to protect an image? How often have you betrayed your own boundary because you didn't want to disappoint someone else? And how much longer? Are you willing to carry the weight of everyone's expectations at the cost of your own center? Because the longer you live for approval, the further you drift from who you really are, and the further you drift, the louder the inner noise becomes. That quiet ache, that subtle resentment, that inner fatigue that no sleep can solve. That's not burnout. That's misalignment. And misalignment is exhausting because it asks you to keep performing while your soul is begging you to pause, to breathe, to turn inward, to ask the one question that changes everything. What would my life look like if I only did what truly aligned? What would you walk away from? What would you stop explaining? What would you stop faking? And most of all, what would you finally feel free to become? Because that version of you, the aligned one, doesn't live for likes. He lives in truth, in calm, in conviction. He speaks less, but every word is real. He moves slower, but every step is in purpose. He listens deeply, because he's not waiting to perform, he's waiting to understand. That's the power of alignment. It makes you immune to noise. You don't chase applause. You don't explain your no. You don't negotiate your values. You stand, quiet, certain, and people feel it because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't need their validation. This is not arrogance. This is internal order. It's when your outer life finally starts matching your inner knowing, and that knowing says, I am not here to please everyone. I am here to honor myself. And from that place, you start to attract differently. People respect your clarity. They mirror your boundaries. They stop expecting access to the old version of you, the one who bent and smiled and complied, because you no longer apologize for who you've become. You just are. And that being, that's the real power. It's what happens when you finally choose alignment over approval and never look back. There's a moment in every life where you're no longer being held back by what's happening around you. You're being held back by what you refuse to let go of, old versions of yourself, old identities you've outgrown, conversations you still rehearse, fights that ended years ago but still live inside your nervous system. You call it memory. The Stoics called it attachment, and attachment is heavy. It slows you down, even when life asks you to rise. It keeps you in cycles, even when clarity is knocking. It traps your energy in places that no longer exist except in your mind. That's why they taught, let go or be dragged. Because there is no standing still when your hands are full of what no longer serves. You're either holding or releasing. You're either carrying the weight or returning to yourself. You can't do both. And the longer you hold what's meant to fall away, the more your life will feel like resistance. Tight, reactive, bitter. You'll think it's your schedule. You'll think it's your job. You'll think it's everyone else, but really, it's what you won't let go of. The expectation that life should have gone differently. The hope that someone will finally understand. The fear that if you let it go, you'll lose a piece of who you are. But letting go isn't loss. It's evolution. It's not forgetting. It's choosing not to carry it forward, because not everything that happened deserves a place in your next chapter. And some emotions aren't yours anymore. They belong to a moment, a version of you, a story that's now complete. But if you keep rereading it, you'll miss the story trying to begin right now. That's what Stoic practice was, the daily work of distinguishing between what you can carry and what you must release. They didn't cling. They didn't chase closure. They didn't wait for apologies to reclaim their peace. They chose freedom, every day. Freedom from the need to fix the past. Freedom from the illusion of control. Freedom from the trap of replaying pain in the name of processing. Because real healing, it's not about going deeper into the wound. It's about stepping out of the loop. And that loop, it ends when you say, I've learned enough. Now I let go. You let go of the explanation you never got. The closure that never came. The person you were when it all happened. And you return. Not to how things were, but to who you actually are. Now, present, whole. You stop arguing with ghosts. You stop defending your pain. You stop identifying with the version of you who didn't know better, because now you do. And when you know, you don't keep dragging the past just to feel safe. You build safety in the present. You create stability in your breath. You root. In the moment, not in the memory. That's Stoic strength, not Stoic suppression. Stoic selection, choosing what still deserves your energy and then releasing what doesn't. So look at what you're still holding. Is it love, or is it fear? Is it yours, or is it inherited? Does it serve your highest self, or just your oldest wound? If it doesn't build you, it doesn't belong to you. Release it, gently, deliberately, without the drama of needing a big ending. And as you let go, you'll feel it. Your breath deepen, your shoulders drop, your energy return. Not because the past is gone, but because you've decided to stop carrying it. Most people are chasing something. More time, more clarity, more peace, more energy. But the harder they chase, the more tired they become. Because what they're chasing was never outside of them. It was always within. This is the paradox the Stoics lived in. The world spins faster, but the wise man slows down. The crowd grows louder, but the centered man grows quieter. Everyone reaches outward, but the Stoic turns inward, not to escape, but to remember. To remember that your energy is not something you get. It's something you become. It doesn't come from caffeine, from momentum, from another productive day. It comes from how rooted you are in yourself, from how little you leak, from how deeply you choose what's worth your response. Because energy is clarity, and clarity is protection. When you know what you're here to do, you no longer scatter yourself to every small demand. You stop auditioning for attention. You stop responding to every urgency. You stop chasing, you become. That shift changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room, not as someone trying to be enough, but as someone who already is. It changes how you speak, not to impress, but to express what's true. It changes how you move, not to please, but to remain aligned. And alignment? That's the source of true energy, because misalignment is exhausting. Doing things you hate, saying yes when you mean no, living in environments that drain you, thinking thoughts that don't even belong to you. That's why you're tired. Not because you need more hours, but because you need more honesty. And honesty begins with the mirror. Am I living in a way that reflects who I really am? Or am I living in a way that keeps others comfortable? Because if you're constantly tired, if you always feel off, your soul is trying to get your attention. Not to add more to your plate, but to take back what's been given away. Your presence, your decisions, your sacred focus. That's what Stoic living offers, not a system, a stance. A way of showing up that doesn't depend on motivation, that doesn't shift based on praise, that doesn't collapse when misunderstood. You don't wake up waiting to feel energized. You wake up already owning your day because you've removed the noise that stole you from yourself. You've stopped giving access to people who speak to your wounds, but never to your growth. You've stopped explaining your boundaries to those committed to misunderstanding them. And most of all, you've stopped chasing energy from the outside world. Because the moment you decided to become energy, you remembered the truth. Power doesn't rush, peace doesn't prove, stillness doesn't seek, it simply radiates. From center, from alignment, from within. You now move with purpose, not pressure. You rest with intention, not guilt. You speak with weight, not volume. And your energy is no longer a reflection of how much you've done. It's a reflection of how little you've betrayed yourself. That's the secret. You don't need more, you need less of what isn't true. And the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop leaking, the moment you stop needing energy from the world, you start radiating it into the world. And that's the shift. You don't chase energy, you become it. You've looked everywhere, in books, in people, in plans, in movement, in stillness that felt like pause, not peace. You've searched for clarity, for calm, for some version of yourself that feels whole. And maybe you thought you'd find it in the right routine, the right relationship, the perfect moment, where the world is quiet, the path is straight, and you finally feel home. But the Stoics would tell you this: you've been looking in the wrong direction, because the place you're trying to reach isn't out there, it's not in the future, it's not an achievement, it's not even in healing, it's in you, right here, right now, in this breath, in this pause. In this moment you decide to stop chasing and start being, not being better. Not being enough, not being fixed, just being whole. Exactly as you are, without the noise, without the guilt, without the need to become something to feel something. That's what they meant when they said, man is disturbed not by things, but by the view he takes of them. Because your chaos isn't in the world. It's in your perception, your expectations, your refusal to sit with what's already true. And what's true is this: you've always had what you needed, but you were too distracted to see it, too focused on becoming to remember that you already are. So let this be the moment, not where you try harder, but where you let go. Let go of the old identity, the one shaped by fear, performance, pressure, the one who needed to be everything for everyone and forgot how to be anything for himself. Let go of the stories that say you need more to be worthy. Let go of the idea that peace is earned through exhaustion and return, not to the past, not to some ideal future, but to your center. That quiet space inside that doesn't need to prove. that doesn't need to fix, that doesn't need anything but truth. And the truth is this: you are the place you've been looking for, not your version from 5 years ago, not the ideal you still dream about, but this version, right here, right now, raw, present, honest. And if you can stand still long enough to feel that, you'll realize you don't need to keep reaching. You don't need to keep chasing. Because when your energy aligns with your presence, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to what's real, to what's meant, to what moves in rhythm with your soul. And when you start living from that place, everything shifts. You don't walk faster, you walk truer. You don't speak more, you speak cleaner. You don't try to be seen. You see yourself fully, finally. Not through the lens of who they said you were, but through the lens of who you choose to be. That choice, that moment of inner alignment, is your freedom. Not a goal, not a destination, but a frequency. And the more you live in it, the less you'll tolerate what doesn't match it. So let this be your return, not to the world, to yourself. Let your stillness speak. Let your silence cleanse. Let your energy shift, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped resisting who you are. You've done enough. You've tried enough. You've been enough. Now just be, and let your presence become the most powerful thing you offer the world. Because in the end, it's not about finding peace, it's about realizing you are peace. You've just been too busy to notice, so notice, breathe, anchor. And remember, you are not the noise. You are not the pressure. You are not the doubt. You are the place you've been looking for all along.